Guys, I would not want to be a Russian soldier at the front right now, sitting in a foxhole, knowing that a large number of Ukrainian brigades are arrayed against you, and just not knowing the time or place. But intercepted phone calls reveal just how terrified the Russians are and the lengths they're willing to go to get away from the front lines. Let's get into it. Okay, first, as always, guys, this comes to us from Insight from Ukraine and Russia. He has been a great content creator throughout this entire conflict. As you can see, I linked to his channel in the description, and I am, of course, the top tier of membership for him. That's the best way to support us creators. Certainly, a lot of platforms don't necessarily love Ukraine conflict content, even though I think it's one of the best and kind of only ways to get real insight into the reality of this war. So support him if you can. Let's get into it.
Russian army of deserters gets bigger day after day. And right now you're going to hear a Russian soldier who decided that he won't fight anymore, and so he shares the news with his wife on the phone. Let's listen to it.
В общем, не очень хорошие новости. Нас, да чё, нас отправляют? Реально. Вот наш наблюдательный пост, вот ихний. Вот.
All right, so right now, there are really two places in the front line, really like one place in the front line, that you would consider a meat grinder, that I would consider those terms to be accurate. The first is, of course, right here in the Bakhmut region. You can see that there's about a maybe a 50 to 80 kilometer stretch of the front line where Ukrainian forces have actively been pushing. The southern point is this Andriivka, and the northern point is near this Orikovo-Vasiliivka. And Ukrainian forces, what they have been doing is they have essentially been trying to hold the city of Bakhmut, but not make any advances. And what they're trying to do instead is push along Bakhmut's flanks. And more importantly, they're trying to draw out the Russian reserve forces. Russia, of course, has an array of troops that are not yet committed to combat, and they exist as a reserve force so that when lines or areas are either in risk of collapse or require additional forces to exploit a breakthrough, that reserve is brought into the fight. Well, these lines, as you can see from the map, have collapsed quite a bit, and Russia has brought up many of its reserve forces, including pulling some forces off of less active areas of the front lines and stuck them in here in order to stop these lines from collapsing around the city of Bakhmut. So this, in all likelihood, is where the fighting is happening. There's also been a lot of fighting near this city of Avdiivka, but it doesn't appear to have quite the same volume of action that we see in and around Bakhmut.
40 метров. У них лес идет, у нас посадка. Наши, извини меня, 3 снаряда, а у них так, подъезжайте. Вчера 2 300-х барсов было. Ну, это как добровольцы.
Okay, BARS is a term for the Russian Combat Reserve. So they describes them as being like volunteers. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I'll show you what he's talking about when he references the forest versus the windbreak. Let's see if we can actually tease out where he's talking about. If my theory is correct, and he's looking at either the north or southern lines, I think what he's probably talking about is this region here. You can see that there is a large forest, and the forest, especially now that the leaves on the trees have foliage, they offer overhead cover. The trees offer natural barriers that prevent armored forces from advancing. They make it very hard to line up shots. Anti-armor weapons have a hard time, or rockets have a hard time penetrating through dense trees. And when he says we only have the windbreak, that is these thin strips of trees that farmers install to demarcate their fields and also to break up strong winds that can damage plants. So again, you can see how you can have multiple trench lines very deep. You can have logistics brought up to your forces. In contrast, you're on such a thin line of cover. It's really precarious. So that's my theory as to where this fighting is taking place. You could see he could also be referencing this area where, again, Ukraine appears to control the forest while Russian forces control these windbreaks. But no matter where it is, you see just how precarious the situation is. We are a year into this war, and it seems like Russian soldiers and officials still can't protect their phone signals, especially when those signals are transmitted over the internet. But honestly, it's never been easier for bad actors to hack any info that's transmitted online. That's why I wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. Grab the big deal now because Atlas VPN is just $199 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get the many benefits of Atlas VPN for this ridiculously low price. You can get this deal by clicking the link in the description below. But be quick, it's a limited time offer. Atlas VPN acts as a digital tunnel, preventing bad actors from hitting you with ads, malicious links, and it notifies you when someone is trying to steal your data. As a bonus, Atlas VPN can give you access to content not available in your country, like certain shows on Netflix or Hulu. It can also let you compare price deals on things like airlines or hotels when they may be cheaper in different currencies. A VPN can also help keep your Google searches private. Oh, and Atlas VPN protects unlimited devices. So grab the big deal now because Atlas VPN is just $199 a month and comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect your privacy and get the many benefits of Atlas VPN for this ridiculously low price. And you can get this deal by clicking the link in the description, but hurry because this is a limited time offer.
Ходить по 4 человека с одной посадки за километров на другую. Напередок.
Right. Again, leading credence to, I think, the fact that in all, I even more strongly suspect that this is sort of the process, right? You can see windbreak to windbreak separated by approximately probably 4 total kilometers, right? So they may be in Klachivka, and they may say, hey, you're expected to follow this route up to these windbreaks in order to get to your objective. Again, if this is a couple days ago, it's probably something like they're pushing here and they're trying to advance through here. This would make sense that this is about 4 kilometers and you would advance from windbreak to windbreak, but have to expose yourself to the open. Remember, these trees also can block things like artillery shrapnel. Whereas when you're in the open, even a round that explodes fairly far away will still send projectiles at you with nothing to stop them.
Вот прям вот миномет, уже стрелковый бой. Укрываться даже нету. Просто в общем, сидишь и молишь.
So when he talks about there's no trenches for cover, this is sort of how offensive momentum works, right? If the Russian forces were in an area for a long time, they would have the time to dig trenches and become even harder to dislodge from those areas. In contrast, if they've been recently pushed back, then they're trying to establish defensive lines in a place with no trenches. And you simply have to it's much easier to drive the enemy out of those locations. So what you don't want in this sort of trench or old style of warfare, you don't want the enemy to have time to entrench. Once you get them moving, you have to keep pushing.
Попадет или нет. Тут сидишь и молишься. Когда тебе наметка 120-х так, что у тебя стены осыпаются. А то они то яйца скидывают, то еще что-нибудь. Вылезает птичка и давай танчику. А танчик меткий. 3 раза промахнется на 4. А кто не хочет подписывать, идти, то объявляет 500-м, вывозит в город, там прокуратура. Вот. Я говорю, мне ничего подписывать не буду, пусть он вызывает.
That's probably...
Okay, this is interesting, right? It doesn't specify what happens then, but from what we've heard from other sources, including the UK's Ministry of Defense, they have found that many of these Russian soldiers who refuse to sign contract extensions are taken to the prosecutor's office. They are often charged with something like desertion or dereliction of duty, and then they are handed a suspended sentence. And functionally, that means that instead of going to jail, where they'll presumably be safe, the suspended sentence means that they are simply ordered remanded to the custody of the military, where they're sent back to the front lines. Again, I want to point out that there's a difference between a legal system and a legal farce, right? In a legal system, an independent third person can rule on what's fair, and they can rule for or against the government. They're empowered to do both. And this is common in the U.S. legal system, where judges, where a whole system of judges are considered a separate but equal branch of government, the judiciary. In contrast, right, the Russian system is authoritarian, and ultimately the apparatus of the state all ends functionally at the Kremlin, which means that when you have something like someone who says, I believe the government isn't treating me fairly, there isn't a separate entity that has the authority to weigh who's right, an individual or the government. It's about power. And when the government has the power, they make the rules. That's why not signing a contract will get you charged and sent to the front line anyway. It's simply because these contracts are a legal farce.
It was the best decision of his life. Okay, and the next interception, to be honest, I just hate it, and my blood is boiling when I hear it, so please be prepared to hear some unpleasant stuff.
Слушай, вчера привели, ночью мы взяли в оцепление лес. Мы же штурмовики, мы идем вперед, стреляем, убиваем. Мы обошли лес с укропами, укроповский.
So, right, he is describing, of course, the assault detachment. And what he is describing is the assault company's role in that. The Russian tactics have evolved now that instead of taking big, large chunks of territory using tanks or other maneuver warfare, they're relying on something called the assault detachment. This is very simple. You have a block of untrained conscripts, the assault company. They're trained to do one thing: move forward, engage targets with their small arms. It takes you days, maybe even hours, to give someone the training they need to function as an infantryman in an assault company. But without advanced infantry training, they can only rely on very simple tactics. A direction, the enemy is in this direction, engage them with your small arm if you see them. You can learn to do that in a few hours. And some ancillary skills like how to put on a tourniquet, etc. But they are supported by better trained troops, right? So you have your assault company that charges up the middle, but then around them, they have artillery, tanks, thermobaric rocket launchers, medevac companies. Sometimes you even have drone operators. These guys are better trained soldiers. They're more professional. The Russian military has spent more hours training them in their skill set, and they hang back and provide fire support. They try to create conditions for this infantry to be effective. And here's the reality: is it works, right? It costs a lot of lives. It's never going to create lightning offensives. But if your goal is to take territory meter by meter, a few dozen meters at a time, one trench or one building at a time, this is an effective way to do it.
Слушаешь, да? Да. Взяли 20 человек в плен и прям в окопе всех расстреляли. Леха вчера у меня кореш начал открывать уши. Почему уши? Чтобы больше не слушали, где мы ходим.
So, okay, I'm going to point this out. This is just a blatant war crime. And you can always assume that people are stupider than you think, but recording yourself saying it is pretty stupid. Especially making sure you make clear that they were captured and then KIA. I'm trying to, keep my verbiage appropriate. So this is a clear violation of the law of war. What also is worth noting is that sometimes soldiers want to seem tough and effective, and this is an example of that. And we're not above it. There was a prominent Navy SEAL who was charged with a crime because he claimed that a captured fighter who was no longer a threat, who was a POW, was still a threat and that he wanted to, use his knife to get a KIA. Does that make sense? And he was so desperate. Even though this was a Navy SEAL with multiple combat deployments, multiple Bronze Stars, a true, absolute, unassailable combat record, he still wasn't satisfied. He still wanted to appear like more of a tough guy. And so he also allegedly committed another war crime. He was convicted and then pardoned. So he was convicted of a war crime of some sort. So this sort of bombastic, over-the-top, tough guy stuff, even though we look and we say, this is disgusting, why would you brag about this? And certainly, why would you make up a story like this? That is exactly what happens.
Сегодня 8 человек попытались нас убить. Это у них, спецоперация была, 8 человек. Они начали проходить сквозь лес, но они, мне кажется, больше от того, что мы там сидим, 8 человек. Мы их...
This sounds like a tough guy. Yeah. I don't believe this. I just don't.
Голову перерезали, потому что...
This would make them an absolutely elite Russian unit to with 8 guys capture 20 plus Ukrainians, commit a war crime, then have a 8-person assault attack your position of 8 people. Certainly, I believe an 8-person squad could repel an attack from 8 people. I believe that. But to claim that you the word is not dismember, it's disembody. I think so. Disembody? Don't let me know in the comments. I don't need that word in my comments. But you know what I mean. They right. Shoot. They did this. They did this thing. There's no way. This is the most tough guy, dumb thing I've ever heard. Like, you did this because they were short on ammo? Don't buy it.
У парня у Антохи закончились патроны. Я говорю, братан, на дембель пойдем?
Yeah. Told you. What is it? I don't understand. I don't get it. And I'm someone who, like, really believes that, like, I believed when I was in Afghanistan that if you soldiers fight wars ethically, right? We are not the Taliban. We fought according to the law of war that involved respect for everyone, right? And I believe that was the right way, the American way of war. And the Taliban didn't, right? They believed that if you didn't believe in their religion, that you weren't a human, that you didn't deserve any rights, that there was no treatment that wasn't deserved because you were in opposition to God. And that, you know, and as an American, like, I find that revolting. So I don't have an obsession with KIAing people with knives or, making up stories in which I'm a cruel, brutal killer. Listen, war is hard if you try to do things the ethical way. You don't need to make up a bunch of tough guy stories, man. You're already a tough guy. You know? It's like being a real MMA fighter and, like, making up your record. It's like, bro, if you're a pro fighter and you have, like, 3 fights, bro, you don't need to make up more. You're already tougher than 99.99% of people. I don't understand it. Bro, if you show... no fault, no judgment. If you're a Russian conscript and you served in this conflict as a frontline soldier of the Russian state, bro, you don't need a knife. I respect it. I don't respect you if you did some of this stuff, but, you know, I respect the combat service, just like a Ukrainian. I respect every one of them. They don't need to get a bunch of tough guy bullshit stories. Like again, I don't understand it because I've seen this same thing, stories that I know for a fact soldiers were exaggerating or making up, and they just want so bad to be even tougher than they already are.
Я говорю, ты мне тот ножик подаришь, как трофей укроповский. Он говорит, без проблем.
I really hope that this guy just exaggerates to look cool in front of his girlfriend or wife or whatever. And I'm sure he will pay for what he's done. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm with Insight. I think I agree with him. I think this is just some tough guy posturing. Anyway, guys, I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you got some insight into this conflict. I know I did. Thank you guys as always. Be sure to check out our sponsor. Link is in the description. See you in the next one.